Please rise to the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty and everlasting God, who presides over all things in heaven and earth, come and preside over these deliberations, so that those that make the decisions may be guided by your wisdom.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to City Council work session. At the completion of the work session, because this is a combined session, we will be going into the formal business of the regular session of City Council. First, we'll start out with the council's agenda. There's a few items on there. First is a resolution authorizing the disposition of records from the tax office. Second is a resolution authorizing the mayor to accept and sign the winter services agreement with the state. Third is an ordinance amending the rules and regulations of the Fire Civil Service Commission of the City of Wilkes-Barre, as adopted by the Fire Civil Service Commission on October 26, 1977, and approved by the City Council and the Mayor of the City of Wilkes-Barre on November 23, 1977. That's in relation to the agility test, and that is first reading on that ordinance. Next, we have an ordinance amending file of council number 1 of 1992, entitled an ordinance adopting council's rules and procedures as amended, and that's matters to be placed on the agenda, first reading. Just as a side note, this ordinance and the next ordinance are just purely housekeeping measures. The changes that are going to be voted on by council today and on the second reading have already been in effect for a number of years. But when I was doing some research on another subject, I discovered that although council wanted these changes a number of years ago, it was never formalized by changing it into the rules of council, which is an ordinance. So we're just formalizing that right now. And next is an ordinance amending file of council number 1 of 1992, entitled an ordinance adopting council's rules and procedures as amended, and that's the order of business, first reading. For ordinances on second and final reading, we have file of council number 6 of 2020, an ordinance of the council of the City of Wilkes-Barre, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, setting forth its intent to issue one or more series of federally taxable and or tax-exempt general obligation bonds of the city in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $24 million. Collectively, the bonds pursuant to the Act of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, PACS 53, Chapters 80-82, as amended, known as the Local Government Unit Debt Act. Next, we have file of council number 7 of 2020, an ordinance of the City of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, amending section 19-209 of chapter 19 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wilkes-Barre, entitled Offenses, Miscellaneous Provisions. Questions or comments on that?
Jim,
Questions
what
or
is that
comments?
The last one, number 7 of 2020. Offenses, miscellaneous provisions, that pertains to?
That's
Fines for littering.
increase in a
That's the
fine?
increase in littering fine, okay, thank
Fines
you.
for littering.
All right.
What exactly are we changing with the agility test?
The agility test was requested by the fire department itself because I believe that was they're doing the same thing that I mentioned in the council ordinances. I believe that they do the agility tests first, right? They did do the agility test first. But it's said in the rules of the fire department, the fire civil service, that the written test should be first, correct?
Okay.
But they had been doing the agility test first. It was never changed, but now they're changing it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Anything? Okay. Mayor?
Hi. Good evening. I'll do my best to try and be as clear as possible walking through this mask, but several things tonight. Asking for your authorizing the proper city officials to sign any and all necessary documents related to the awarding the contract to the lowest responsible bidder for the police station
Do you want to pass?
police station shower and facility PPE upgrade. Now, the payment for this be made through the OECD, CDBG, -CV grants. Authorizing the proper city officials to sign any and all necessary documents related to the awarding of the contract to the lowest responsible bidder for the McCarriger and Grove Streets Park project. Payment to be made through OECD. This is a park that was promised when the housing development was put together. It never materialized, so we committed to doing that in my administration, and we have the funds that are available that we're going to build that park for those kids.
Mr. Mayor, those funds also include the donation that Pat Stella from McDonald's gave to HDC?
No, they do not.
So there's a $6,000 check out there for us.
It is, and then we have to find out where that's at, Councilman, and try and get it.
Yeah.
But this does not count that. This is strictly the money that we've carved out,
Okay.
okay? And we will go after that.
Yeah, there's a photograph in the paper and everything, so it's got to be somewhere with HDC.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not sure we know where that is right now. Am I right, Brett? What was it? Remember when this was designated that, I think it was McDonald's, am I right?
Correct, McDonald's.
McDonald's had a $6,000 or $7,000 award to go towards the park. But what we're going to be doing is, that's not part of the monies that we've allocated for this, but we're going to go after it and try and find out where that is. Okay?
No, we didn't receive it.
We'll let you know.
HDC
We'll send you a
received it.
communication if we receive it, just to give you an update. But as of now, Councilman, no, that's not part of this.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Authorizing proper city officials to sign any and all necessary documents related to the awarding of the contract to the lowest responsible bidder to the 2020 CDBG various street paving projects, Phase 1 and Phase 2. Authorizing the proper city officials to enter into a 39-month agreement with, fogging up on me, I apologize, with 8x8 for VoLP phone service. Authorizing proper city officials to enter into a 36-month agreement with Loop Internet LLC for backup internet. Folks, this is, and I have to thank Frank Hirschberger for what he's done here. What he did was he went out and he looked at some other resources that are available to us for phone and internet service, and because of his hard work, we're going to see a monthly savings of $1,347.74. So going forward, every month going forward, once this is instituted, we'll see that savings versus what we're paying right now. So Frank, I want to thank you for that. Great job.
Good job, Hirsch.
Authorizing proper city officials to submit $3 million multimodal transportation fund grant application funded by the Commonwealth Financing Authority of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to be used for the Scott Street Streetscape Improvement Project. I announced that PennDOT will be doing their portion of Scott Street. Part of Scott Street is the PennDOT road, part of it's a city road. PennDOT has committed to do their part. With your approval, with this funding, if it's approved and we receive it, we'll be doing the city's part of Scott Street. But it's not just the street paving, it's a streetscape, which means ADA accessible corners. It's going to be the new catch basins. It's a total streetscape project, but it also includes repaving and resurfacing the city's section of Scott Street. So I'm hoping you're going to see the value in that. I think that's been something that's been on the board for a long time, right, Bill?
Absolutely, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Authorizing the proper city officials submit a $3 million multimodal transportation fund grant application funded by Commonwealth Financing Authority, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, used for Public Square Streetscape Improvement Project. This is the one side that was not finished. It's the side that faces Chick-fil-A and King's College and Leadership Wilkes-Barre building there. It'll be completing that project, and if you get the approval and we get the necessary funding for that. Also, amending an ordinance of the council previously enacted on May 11, 2017, that authorized the issuance of its general obligation bonds and/or notes of the city in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $52 million, pursuant to the act of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, known as Local Government Unit Debt Act, Act 53 PACS, Chapters 80-82, as amended to provide funds towards certain projects recited therein, providing that said ordinance be amended, provide that the proceeds of the bonds shall be used towards additional capital projects of the city that consist of 1, planning, designing, acquiring, constructing, installing, furnishing, and equipping of alterations, renovations, additions, and improvements to the facilities of the city, including but not limited to an elevator replacement project. I'll stop there for a minute and just explain that our current elevator has not been functioning for over a month. We've had 3 contractors in to take a look at it. We're no further along than we were. It's still not usable. It's not ADA compliant. My goal is to get approval that we can utilize the funds and put in a brand new ADA compliant elevator. We'll also, if approved, put a brand new stairway in also. It's another egress for people, and it really is needed. Something should have been done years ago. With your approval, I'd like to be able to get the monies to do that. Also, City Hall repair, the infrastructure projects in the city also, including purchasing capital equipment for use in the connection with the facilities of the city, and additional capital projects of the city in the extent approved by the council of the city, authorizing and directing specified officers of the city to do and take and perform certain necessary and/or appropriate acts and things relating to such amended ordinance, providing that the remainder of said ordinance shall remain in full force and effect, and providing with this ordinance shall be in effect. I think that's enough for you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
For the 52 million, is there any possibility that a portion of that money can be used to offset the deficit for the year? Or does it have to be used for these specific purposes?
Has to be used for the capital projects.
Okay.
Part of that money, now understand folks, this was in 2017, this was taken out. We're just looking at whatever's left from the projects that were outlined, that we could put that towards the much needed things that we need in the city, okay? First of all, as I said, first of all, the elevator, but there's so many other things that are needed. And if you like, I could have Butch elaborate as to other projects, but no, I wish we could, because we're gonna have roughly a $4 million shortfall, and that'd be a nice way, but that cannot be used for revenue replacement, Mrs. McBride.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
No other questions? Jim, you okay?
Okay, that's it for the mayor's agenda. Before we take a few moments to change the audio, we'll have council presentations.
Okay. Mr. Belisco.
I really have nothing today, but I want to just tell council about the good things that are happening in District A. Phase 2 of the Solomon Creek project, it's in its final month. And right as that's being completed, the Strauss Lane Bridge is underway with bids. I'm very pleased with the administration. Things are happening in South Wilkes-Barre. The Silk Mill is almost down there. I know you have other projects you want to take down, but I'm happy that Strauss Lane Bridge, and I've been in contact with Butch a little. I thank all of you, and Joyce for helping me in District A. Thank you. That's all, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Council, excuse me, just for another reminder, for purposes of proper receipt of your comments, if you could speak directly into the microphone, don't turn around to anyone behind you, if at all possible.
I was talking to
Just
them,
makes
not
it
the
easier.
microphone.
Just makes it easier to transcribe.
Okay, I won't anymore, Teach.
Okay. Mr. Marconi?
I do have a question for Chief Coffey. I was just wondering about the body cameras, Chief, on where we're at with that. I know you were looking into them and we were testing them, so I was just curious on where we're at with that one.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the third company. We're waiting for the third company to send us the prototypes so that we can test that out. That would probably be the final company we'd be dealing with, and then we'll be able to make an informed decision on what's best both for the officers and financially for the city.
Do you have any time frames, roughly? 6 months, 2 months?
No, I'm hoping to do it as soon as possible. That's about all I can say. Once we get them and test them, then it's a matter of making the decision on which company to go with, and then those things will have to be made specifically for the department.
Okay.
Once we make that decision, it should be within a month or two that we could probably get those. I'm also in the process now of drafting a policy for it, to add to our policy.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. McBride?
A few things. The street sign on the corner of Howard and South Sherman is missing, if we could have that replaced. Secondly, did PennDOT look at East Northampton Street yet, the intersection?
No, they have not been. We've requested it, and I understand PennDOT is working remotely for the most part, and it creates some issues for us because it's very hard to get answers on a whole bunch of things, not just that, but they have not.
Okay.
As soon
Have
as
they
I know
provided?
a possible date, I will certainly share it with everybody.
Okay. They haven't provided any sort of a timeline or anything?
They have not.
Okay. Lastly, thank you for cutting the grass at Mayflower Park. There has been a volunteer group that's been picking up debris around the park and things like that, so it definitely makes a difference that the grass is cut. I do think that the baseball field needs some maintenance. Specifically, if we could have the net that's not really a net anymore removed, that would be helpful. And also, there's a lot of weeds that are growing sort of over the dugout and along the fence and things like that, so if we could spruce that up, it would look a lot better in that area. That's all I have.
We noted that.
What was that?
We made a notation, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Brooks?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank all my council members for supporting the initiative that Rowing Mill Hill Residents Association started with collecting signatures for a petition to repeal the fireworks ordinance in Harrisburg. We got 750 signatures. I spoke with State Representative Eddie Dapashinsky today. We're going to drop off those petitions to his office to take to Harrisburg on Monday. I also want to thank the mayor for his leadership also in the issue, and also thank Chief Coffey for giving us the statistics. Here's the interesting things that have happened. 4 years ago, in 2016, the July 4th weekend, 3 days, we had 24 calls. That's 4 years ago. This past July 4th weekend, we had 217 calls. 24 to 217 in 4 years. That's what, tenfold amount of calls. Again, it just amazes me of the inconsideration and downright cruelty that some neighbors will have for their neighbors with this fireworks issue. I've had repeated conversations with elderly people who are so nervous in their house they can't even bear to confront their neighbor, which I find the opposing neighbor who's doing the fireworks to be just mean and cruel. But it shows you how much that this issue has escalated in 4 years. So if you think about it, 217 calls, all those calls are handled. What's happening to other real issues in the city? And then the expense that it takes to handle these calls. So it's costing us more money. It is annoying our neighbors and our residents tremendously. And we can see from these statistics how much it's gone up. So I just wanted to thank my colleagues. I know everyone here has signed the petition and got some of their neighbors to sign it. I think 750 signatures for our city of our size is fantastic, being collected over the last couple of months. And I thank you all again for that. This impending deficit. Mr. Mayor, just let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you in solving this impending crisis. I see it coming as a $4 million deficit. Anything we can do to help you in lobbying Cartwright and Casey and Toomey, just let us know. And I'm sure all of us want to make sure that we can get through this without damaging our budget going forward.
Councilman, thank you. And when we come to you with some ideas and ask for your approval and your agreement, everything that we come to you before you is fiscally worked out with our whole team here. Okay, we try to make sure that it's financially, fiscally responsible. So please understand, you know, what we're trying to do, like when which is for you tonight, we're rewriting some of the bonds that we're doing. That's fiscally responsible. We're taking interest at 4% and cutting it down to 2%. We're going to see $700,000+ that the city is going to see, which is going to help offset part of that over $4 million. So we're looking at everything. And by the way, that's not a scoop loan. It doesn't kick it down at all. It's the same maturity dates. It's just good financial plannings. And that's what we're trying to do. So when we come before you, believe me, we've checked everything out. We've double-checked everything. And before I come to you, I should say, please understand that we're trying to do diligence, whatever is best for the residents, and trying to shorten that $4.4 million deficit. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. First, before I forget, I just wanted to thank Jim and Kathy. A special thank you to Mr. Hirschberger for all he's done to get us here. Also, the Greater Wilkes-Barre Chamber of Commerce and the others involved that have stepped up and helped us out in our time of need between the pandemic and the elevator situations and the roof off and everything else. We certainly appreciate their help. And Butch and his staff, I know, in moving everything around and helping get everything back and forth. So it's great that we can be here. I know that it's very limited attendance by the public here at the meeting, but again, that's not our numbers. We are capped at the number of people that we have here. So we really appreciate everything that everybody has done to get us to be able to sit here this evening. And speaking of this evening, this is the eve of the September 11th attacks. We all know the single deadliest terror attack in U.S. history and the single deadliest incident for firefighters and police officers in U.S. history as well. We all know the significance of it. And before we take a break and move into the formal meeting, I just ask that we take a moment to remember, a moment of silence and reflection of what did occur 19 years ago in our country. I know that sometimes it seems like just yesterday and sometimes it seems so long ago, but it's something that we can never forget. So if we just take that moment before we move forward. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
I know you need to
Thank
do
you.
some resetting there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we take a few moments to change the audio recorder, et cetera, if there are no objections by council and by unanimous consent, the resolutions and ordinances will be voted on as consent agendas. Are there any objections? Okay, then so be it. They will be consent agendas at the regular session. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a few moments. The masks don't help, I don't think.
Okay, ready, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, thank you, sir. Please rise to the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty and everlasting God, who presides over all things in heaven and earth, come and preside over these deliberations so that those that make the decisions may be guided by your wisdom.
Roll call, Mr. Ryan, please.
Okay, Mr. Belusko.
Here.
Mr. Marconi.
Here.
Mrs. Gilbert McBride.
Present.
Mr. Brooks.
Here.
And Mr. Barrett.
Here.
Also in attendance tonight is Mayor George C. Brown, Administrator Charlie McCormick, Police Chief Joe Coffey, Assistant Attorney Maureen Collins. Sorry, my glasses are fogging up here. Deputy Administrator, Director, and Director of Operations Butch Frotty. Finance Director Brett Kittrick. Chief Joe Coffey. IT Director Frank Hirschberger. Assistant City Clerk Catherine Payne, and Administrative Assistant Lisa Sanfilippo. Okay. Does anyone in attendance in person from the public wish to comment on any agenda item before council tonight? Mr. Troy?
Move forward.
Yep, come to the mic, please.
Good evening. First of all,
Your name,
Just-
Sam, for the record.
Sam Troy, Wilkes-Barre, Joseph Lane. I haven't been to a few meetings. Well, this is the first one I attended in person in a while, obviously, with the pandemic. But I see the mayor's agenda is now separate from council's agenda. And I was wondering,
It's always been that way.
I'm
Always
glad that
been.
came about, I guess, but
No, you're looking at the work session, Sam.
what's that?
You're looking at the work session. This is the regular session. The agendas are combined.
Just the council agendas, can I comment on? That's it. Is that what you're saying?
Anything on the agenda for, that
Huh?
any of the resolutions and ordinances that are up for this evening, you can
Just for
comment.
council though, right?
Both, both.
Well, this one for the mayor's agenda, if I may ask, the authorizing the issuance of the obligation bonds and notes of the city, aggregate amount not to exceed 52 million. So, this seems to be, a little bit ambiguous. I always have trouble reading these, but I don't know if anybody, does the mayor or anybody here know, what specifics? I see the elevator replacement project, which is critical to the operations of the city, I understand is part of this, but it's not to exceed 52 million, but is there, can it be, how much less can it be? How many projects can there be? I'm just wondering if they're more specific. It's pretty vague, it's pretty ambiguous as to what projects besides the elevator replacement project that's going to happen here. And I'm wondering what else, maybe the mayor can explain it or somebody can explain what else is he has in mind there. That's a lot of money, and well, I mean, I'm assuming it's not going to be nearly the 52 million, but maybe because I came in late, I don't know of any more specifics there. A couple other things. I don't see the timer on, Mr. Ryan, so I guess I got 5 minutes. Oh, there it is. I was worried about that.
The second reading of the file of council number 6 of 2020 regarding the $24 million collectively called the bonds. This was, I know the first reading was at the last meeting, and I'm just wondering, this was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, initiated by the mayor also. And I was a little taken back, a little disappointed with the vote of council last time to refinance this debt. I thought, look, I know the city's in dire financial straits, I know this. But to put another $24 million on a tab, maybe you can elaborate on this. Isn't that going to undermine the city's credit rating in the long run? All right, you're going to save some money this year, I understand that. In the short term. In the long term, it's going to add to the overall debt. So 5 years or 10 years down the road, the city's going to find itself in more extreme dire financial straits. So I'm just wondering if maybe you could explain, or somebody could explain to me, the logic of this and why this was passed on the first reading and why it's probably going to pass again. Is there an alternative here? Will that also, Mayor, somehow preclude the need or avert the need for a property tax increase? If it does, then that's, I guess, a good thing. But I don't, as far as I know, that this bond issue would probably not be able to go. The money here from the bonds would not be able to go into the general fund. Also, the streetscape, I'm totally in favor of these, although authorizing, this is the mayor's agenda, the next to the last item before ordinance is the streetscape project improvements. The streetscape project improvements, $3 million multimodal transportation fund. I would be a little bit cautious of this if it does get approved, Mayor or council members. I know there was a multiscape that I was in touch with Mr. Rogish up there near where you live, and there already was a project up there, a streetscape project. I don't know, I guess it wasn't on Scott Street though, it was more in your section, in the neck of the woods, right?
Georgia.
This is all well and good, but I know in some cases, being on the tree commission, I was concerned that in this project that Mr. Rogish and I discussed near your house, Bill, as far as I know, they did concrete over some places where there were trees. I think they not only planted some trees, but they cut down some trees, which as far as I know were in pretty good health. So I think if that money does come through, that's one of the things that should be, one of the caveats that we should be concerned with. I mean, the city should be concerned with before that thing goes through. And if Multiscape is necessarily the best firm to do that, I don't know. That's something also that probably should be put out for bid. Anyway, that's basically all I have. I don't know if I can get any response to that.
Mayor, I know you want to explain the bond.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
No, please.
Mr. Troy, just let me clarify a couple of things for you. We'll go with the last item first, if you don't mind. We have not done a streetscape in Scott Street. We did one on George Avenue in the prior administration. This one, Scott Street, is split up between PennDOT, part is PennDOT, part is owned by the city. PennDOT has notified us they're going to come in and they're going to totally redo their section of Scott Street. This $3 million is to take the city's part of Scott Street. I mean, it's horrendous. It's really terrible, and John will tell you that. It's just a mess. So what we want to do there is, Mr. Troy, take the city's part, and with this grant, be able to redo the streets, redo the corners, make the handicap accessible, sidewalks, and new catch drains. So it's separate from what you were referring to. That was George Avenue. That was done through the prior administration. This is Scott Street itself, okay? Couple other things. When you referred to the $24 million and 52, they are existing loans. They're not loans that I'm asking to take out. They were loans that were taken out through the prior administration.
Okay.
And Sam, what we did was, one of the things, because of the COVID virus, interest rates have dropped dramatically. We're not doing anything other than, with the $24 million, right now, according to the contract that we have on those, we're paying 4% interest. Because of the lower rates, we're just rewriting the interest rate to 2%, and the city will see roughly $770,000 savings on just the interest rate. But I want to qualify for you, it's not new indebtedness. And we're not changing the time of maturity either. This is not a scoop loan. All we're doing is we're rewriting to a low, it's like as if you refinanced your home, it's the same thing, but we're keeping the same maturity, and this was already taken out. The $50+ million was taken out by the prior administration, okay? This is also not a new loan, that we're not going into indebtedness. These are loans and bonds and other things that were taken out by the prior administration. Now, what I'd like to do is bring in a gentleman that has been working with us, and he'll get into more detail with you. Brian?
On that $52 million ordinance, that ordinance approved a bunch of refundings of existing debt along with the Solomon Creek project. That was the only thing that was the only new money project that was authorized in that ordinance. All this ordinance is doing tonight is amending that provision to allow those proceeds to be used for additional projects of the city as the mayor has gone through. So it's not a new borrowing, it's just substituting that project definition. And this is the way the state wants us or requires us to do it. We have to pass an ordinance, there'll be a pre-adoption ad before the second and final reading. The ordinance will be adopted, amending that. A second ad goes in the paper and we file it with the state. So that's the process by which to change the project of an existing ordinance, and that's all that's happening with that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Troy. Anyone else on pending legislations here? John?
John Sahosky, Almond Lane. First thing, good job with this park on McCarrigan Grove. That needed to be done. That company, I'm pretty sure they promised that they were going to do that, and I know that Joyce was talking about chasing down that money for a while. So, good job stepping up, because I ride my bike by there. Those kids play in that parking lot. They don't really have any space in that area, so that really needs to be done. A question about this loop internet. Not that it's a question, like that there are backup internet. That seems, I'm not 100% sure, but that seems like a Wilkes-Barre company. At some point, could they maybe be our primary internet? Because I don't know. I just think if they're a company based out of this area, we should be investing in somebody who's going to base their company out of this city. These two streetscape projects, Commonwealth Finance Authority, that's casino money, correct? Like that's coming out of, yes, no? No?
No.
It's not LSA.
Not else.
It's not LSA, but that doesn't, none of that's, okay.
No, these are, they moved up the time period. They usually come at the end, toward the end of the year. They moved up the application process to the end of September. And they're ongoing, through the finance agency in the state, and they're grants. They're not matching or anything.
Yeah, I know that they're not like the LSA, but I thought, maybe I'm a little confused.
No, they're funded through the finance agency, but I assume they're funded by some bonds.
They do. The Commonwealth Finance Authority issues their own bonds to fund these projects.
And then they'll have a pot of money, and then you make application for it.
Okay, so we don't, these aren't attached to the casino, so we don't gotta worry about any of that stuff.
They're
Okay.
not LSA grants.
Okay, so it's just.
John, I don't
Multi-
believe there's been any announcements on the LSA grants that were put forth, but we're committed as a city going forward with LSA grants, put them in to benefit the city. This is something you've been after for a long time, and I've heard you for years say this. Well, we're going to do that. We're going to put LSA requests in for the city to help the city, and if we need to purchase something. I mean, we just purchased a new street sweeper. We purchased a new vacuum. These are the type things that we're going to ask, council to submit them for so that we can benefit the city, okay?
I promise you there's a smile under this mask.
I'm sorry?
I said, I promise you there's a smile under this mask, just hearing somebody say that. Yeah, I've been screaming that for years. With the last thing with this $52 million, like what you're changing, what could you purchase with that? Like, could you purchase, basically, I would like you guys to purchase a Python 5000, like a pothole filling machine. Like that, I don't know, would you be able to do that with that money? Okay, that's just something I think that, you know, that's, if you have that kind of money and you have it where you could use it, I'd really like you guys to get some kind of pothole filling machine where instead of, I'm just not happy with the equipment that you guys have right now to fill potholes. Go ahead.
Sure. One thing I wanted to mention, though, that's, most of that money, the 52 million that was originally issued, went towards for fundings. There was a little bit in there, a couple $1 million in there for Solomon Creek, and that was the only project. So it just, what's available is just what's didn't need to be spent on Solomon Creek. So there's only a little bit left of that. But obviously, we want to take advantage of using those funds that are already sitting there for additional projects. And it could be any capital project of the city. It just can't be for working capital purposes because it was a tax exempt bond issue.
Okay. I think I'm done. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else in attendance for pending legislation? Do you have any calls?
Okay, we will now take questions on agenda items from the public by phone. The phone line is now open. Agenda items only, please, and 5 minutes per call, please. Okay.
While we're waiting, I just wanted, one more thing that Mr. Troy had mentioned. I know you and I had spoken about it, Frank, about the internet provider. The primary internet provider that we currently use, there's certain standards that they must meet or capabilities, and that is the reason why we are structured the way you are. Maybe you can elaborate on that if you have a second, but. You can, if you don't mind. In response to Mr. Troy's question.
Yeah, no problem. The backup internet issue is, Loop is a fairly new internet company. They have only come and have been building infrastructure in the city over the past maybe 5 or so years. And the current provider we have now is well rooted. They have amazing infrastructure with Pentella data. They're everywhere in the valley. That's not to say that it could not change in the future, that it could, but it's really semantics. They're both there to be used.
Okay.
It's not like one is like somehow not as good. It's just because they're a newer company and the one we have now is well established.
Well, we appreciate all that you've done and the research that you've done on this. Okay, sorry, Jim. Just wanted to.
Okay, is there a caller on the line? Go ahead, please.
Your name and your address, please, for the record.
Do we have a caller?
Hello?
Hello?
Are you able to hear me?
You're addressing
Sorry.
council. Please state your name and address, please, for the record.
Sure. My name is Sophia Goodfellow, 132 Dorrance Avenue, Wyoming, Pennsylvania.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Councilman Brooks, Councilman Marconi, Councilman Belusco, Councilman Gilbert McBride, Councilman Barrett, and Mayor Brown. First, let me start by saying that I hope everyone there is staying well during these unprecedented times. Like I said, my name is Sophie, and I'm calling to ask you to vote in favor of the Citizens Police Review Board.
I'm going to have to stop you.
like to-
Excuse me 1 second. This is on pending legislation. We're at the point in the meeting right now that we're not discussing any other items other than what's on the agenda, and that item is not on the agenda this evening. You're certainly welcome to call back. If you're watching us live, we get to the point of the meeting where public comments are invited, and you can call back during that particular part of the meeting.
That will be towards the
Okay,
end of the
will
meeting.
do.
That'll be towards the end of the meeting.
Sorry to interrupt. you,
Please
but
call
thank you.
back then. Thank you.
Okay, any other calls on pending legislation? Pending legislation only.
Good evening. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, Jason Carr from Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. The question that I have regarding pending legislation tonight is at the last Wilkes-Barre City Council meeting, Councilman Barrett did not know what the cost of the Solomon Creek wall was going to be. And I am wondering how you now are able to determine that there are additional funds available from the original $52 million bond, $4 million being attributed to the Solomon Creek wall. How do you know how much money is now available for, or if there is enough money available to complete road paving as well as an elevator for City Hall, if you don't know if there's enough money to complete the Solomon Creek wall? Additionally, I was able to speak off the record to someone at the Department of Community and Economic Development. Now, I hope that's the right term or the right synonym for the department that I spoke to, but they did state, I guess, the discrepancy that I've been asking about that no one has been able to answer is that I believe, from what they told me, somewhere over $2.5 million of the grant money that was attributed to the wall had to be given back to the state of Pennsylvania. Now, I was wondering, were those issues internally that happened regarding the city not filing correct grant applications, or was it an issue with the engineer that would affect the $52 million bond that you're claiming now there's enough money to put in an elevator and pave streets? I greatly appreciate some definitive answers.
Okay,
So we can answer that.
okay, thank you.
So first off, on the remaining funds, it's an estimate at this point. We're estimating about $1 million to be remaining. I said, it's an estimate at this point. We're estimating about $1 million to be remaining. If the project, the Solomon Creek project, ends up running a little more, then there'll be less left over, and we'll, when that project is complete, we'll be able to see exactly how much is left to fund other projects. But obviously, we won't know that until it is complete. And then, what was the second question? I apologize. Oh, so 2 of the grants were disaster recovery grants directly tied to the storms from 2011, and we needed to be able to substantiate the expenditures and prove that they were directly tied to those storms, and we only had, I think, a little over $1 million in such expenditures. So the rest of the money not returned, just retained by the state.
And I want, just for clarification purposes, Mr. Card mentioned that I wasn't able to provide that information at the last meeting. However, subsequent to the last meeting, Mr. Kittrick and the rest of his staff did provide the information, a breakdown on the Solomon Creek project to our satisfaction. So, and we know it's an ongoing project, as you had just mentioned. So thank you for that. I know that took a little bit of work to get that all together from the different departments. We do appreciate that.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So do we know that we will have 24 million left over? Is that coming from the Solomon Creek project, the leftover bonds?
The 24 million is just a not to exceed amount that will issue debt. It'll end up being less than that, most likely. And that all is going towards to pay off existing debt. So we'll borrow at a lower rate, pay off the existing debt, and then that's where the savings will come from. The Solomon Creek thing is tied to the $52 million issue.
Right, I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
That was done in 2017. So as Brian mentioned, the majority of that 52 million, with the exception of the 4.4 million in net proceeds that we got for Solomon's Creek, was for a refinancing, and then just the remaining 4.4 is what we have for the project. And we don't anticipate to spend all of that at this point. So that's where the additional money for projects will come in.
Okay. Thank you.
But also, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't spend the money, it's not like we get to keep it, okay? It's a drawdown, and it stays with the state. So it's not like I have $3 million in the desk drawer of my office, okay? It's a drawdown, and we don't get to keep it if we don't expend it. Is that correct, Brian?
It would have to be, under the tax rules, it would have to be applied to pay down that debt if we don't use it on other projects.
Okay.
So there is no extra millions of dollars that have been, the connotations that have been made that there's extra millions of dollars that we're playing with. We're not playing with an extra dime. All we're asking you today is, if there is money left over, and it may be to the tune of roughly $1 million, allow us to spend that on things like the elevator and any other capital projects that we need. So that's all we're saying, okay? There's no extra $4 million. And we'll be very, very happy to show you an updated and factual listing of those dollars, not something that, incorrect numbers. We're going to give you factual numbers. I'd be happy to give every member of council a copy of that, okay?
And when will we know if we have money left over to use for capital projects? When will we know if we have those funds left over?
That's probably more of a question for Joyce. She's been the lead on that project. Do we have an estimate of when that will be complete?
Our understanding is that there's only a small piece left, but involved the placement of the pumps, which was delayed because the manufacturer couldn't get them out. So we anticipate that this project should be finished within the next 4 to 6 weeks. However, then you gotta, double check your numbers, et cetera, et cetera. We should have an idea, and we'll certainly give council what's left as far as we know. Now, that's assuming there's no overruns or no problems, you never know that, but that's a rough line. But every time we give lines about things, unfortunately, during the COVID, strange things happen. So everything I hear is, our information is that those pumps will be placed in, and that project should be ready to be finalized out in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, and Councilwoman, I walked the project last week. And if you guys have a chance, I suggest you take, right, Mike? I suggest you take a walk down there. They've been doing some great work. We get the pumps put in. I'm hoping you all will join us for the ribbon cutting in the next, say, month and a half or so. It will be definitely in 2020, but it's a great project for the residents down there. So hopefully we'll all be sitting there cutting it, or standing there cutting a ribbon and shaking hands and being very happy. So it's going to happen relatively soon.
So are we voting on this now because the elevator needs to be fixed, instead of waiting until the project's complete to see exactly how much is left?
Go ahead, Brian.
Really, we just wanted to start the process because it does take a little while. There's the first reading, we have to advertise it, the second reading, another ad, and then it goes down to the state. So this process with the multiple readings and the ads and the filing is going to take a month anyway. So we wanted to just make sure and start that process.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have engineering to do, with the elevator. And so it's going to be a process that we need your approval to, so that we can make commitments to start the project.
Okay.
But like I said, any numbers that you ask, we're going to give you with no problem.
Yeah, and once again, really the only change is the way that ordinance was originally drafted, it just provided for the Solomon Creek project. A lot of times it will say other projects, as we've done in this, that are approved by council or administration. That was just limited to Solomon Creek, so we just are expanding that so that if there are funds available, you can do other things that the city wants to do, so.
And council will need to vote on any other project, correct? That comes out of this money?
The same process you always use
Okay.
for expenditure of funds, so.
It'd be a contract.
Right,
It'd
okay.
be a contract, so you'd have to vote on the contract.
Okay.
We'll do RFP.
Yeah, do the RFPs. That'd be the normal situation.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
It's
That's
just
all.
under state law with that original ordinance. If we've only said for Solomon Creek, unless we change it, we can't do it under that bond ordinance. So it's just
Sure.
it wasn't expansive enough really in the first place, so.
And one other issue I would like to point out, if we do that and we have the elevator, Brett did a great job of, this will not come out of general budget. So the elevator has to have something done, and so Brett did a great job of, looking at available sources and potentially available sources so that we wouldn't have to tap general budget funds for any large expenditures that we had. So we're sort of moving that process along so that we're ready and available as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Any pending calls on legislation? No?
Nope, no pending calls.
Okay, Mr. Ryan, you can move forward with the formal vote.
Okay, thank you. We'll have the consent agenda resolutions, a motion second and vote, please.
So moved.
Mr. Brooks,
Second?
is that John? Oh, Mike Beluska, okay. Mike was the second. All right, for the vote, Mr. Beluska,
Yes.
Mr. Marconi,
Yes.
Mrs. McBride,
Yes.
Mr. Brooks,
Yes.
and Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next is the consent agenda ordinances. Motion second and vote.
Motion.
Mr. Barrett.
Second.
And Mr. Marconi. Mr. Beluska,
Yes.
Mr. Marconi,
Yes.
Mrs. McBride,
Yes.
Mr. Brooks,
Yes.
and Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Thank you. And adoption of the minutes of authorities, boards, and commissions listed, please.
Motion.
Bill? Okay.
Mike.
Mike, I'm sorry. These things muffle. Okay, Mr. Belusko. Second?
Second.
Second is Bill. Okay, on the vote, Mr. Belusko.
Yes.
Mr. Marconi?
Yes.
Mrs. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
And Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Motion passes also.
Okay. Go back to our council members again. Anything additional, Mr. Beluska?
I'd like to thank our city clerk and assistant city clerk, as well as Lisa Sanfilippo and Hirsch for this, getting this together today. It's gonna work, it's working out really nice, and good job, guys, to all. That's all, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Agreed. Mr. Marconi?
I have nothing further.
Okay, Mrs. McBride?
I have nothing further.
And Mr. Brooks?
Are these our speakers? Oh, good. They're really nice. Thank you. Nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, we're going to move into the public discussion. We do have some
General
guests here
business,
this evening. General business, public discussion.
general business emails. Before we-
Oh, okay. You want to go into those
Okay.
first? Go ahead.
Yep. We have three of them, which are, I'll read one of them, but they're all essentially the same, same form and the same project, same item in support of. This is from Jane Rinkevich. And she states, members of City Council, I am writing to voice my support for the Historic Preservation Ordinance to be proposed as an addition to the City of Wilkes-Barre zoning ordinance at the September 10th City Council meeting and plan for a final vote at the October 8th session. More than 2,300 communities in the United States with active historic preservation ordinances have recognized that existing buildings contribute to the texture, integrity, and economic vibrancy of their regions. Yet Wilkes-Barre is one of the only cities of its size in Pennsylvania that still does not provide local protections for its historic structures. How many irreplaceable buildings could have been saved in the past 2 decades, or even in the case of Frank Clark Jewelers in the last 2 months? Instead, rare and uncommon treasures in our community are torn down for surface parking or allowed to decay beyond repair. I ask you to remember that our historic preservation ordinance will protect not only historic structures, but also adjacent homes and businesses against the devaluing effects of property deterioration. We are told that historic preservation impedes development, but what thriving communities across this country have long since recognized is that architectural heritage is not only a cultural asset, but also an economic one. Through contemporary development strategies such as adaptive reuse, the best way to build our future is often to preserve our past. Sincerely, Jane Rinkevich. And we have two other documents from two other people, Patricia Parks, South Franklin Street, and I can't read the other Parks, but it's another member of the Parks family, also voicing their concerns for this ordinance yet to be proposed on Wilkes-Barre Historic Preservation Ordinance.
I'll make a comment. So
Sure, Mr. Brooks.
I'm going to introduce it on October 8th, and I'm sorry for the confusion here, but I want to make sure I sit down with Mayor Brown and Bill Harris from zoning first before I introduce it to my colleagues. So that's just a delay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We also have two emails from two separate people. They are related, but they're both in support of Mayor Brown's Citizen Advisory Committee versus the Civilian Review Board that was voted down, but still seems to be an issue. They do have different wording in them, so I'm going to read each one of them individually. Hello, my name is Joe Ferdinand, and I am a Wilkes-Barre resident. I am writing in support of Mayor Brown's Citizen Advisory Committee rather than the Civilian Review Board that was proposed. It is irresponsible for our local government to support the investigation of a police officer's actions when that review is led by a politically motivated group. We have a court system in place to address criminal activity on the part of a police officer. A police officer's job is to protect and serve. This is difficult enough without the added concern of how his or her actions may be immediately perceived, sensationalized, or used in order to advance a political agenda. Mayor Brown's Citizen Advisory Committee is a proactive approach to address a sensitive and complicated issue without being divisive. I do not support the Citizen Review Board, and I believe that Mayor Brown is doing the right thing for all parties involved. Signed, Joe Ferdinand. The other one is starts with, good afternoon. My name is Bridget Ferdinand and a citizen of Wilkes-Barre. I'm writing in support of Mayor Brown's Citizen Advisory Committee versus the Civilian Review Board that was voted down, but still seems to be an issue. I believe the advisory committee would further improve and enhance the community relations with our police department, which already does a tremendous job of being involved in the community with their programs and community policing. Our police department is very responsive to the community and does not need an untrained special interest group interfering with processes that are already in place. Why, and each letter in Y are capitalized, fix something that isn't broken. A civilian review board, as proposed, would only serve to inhibit how they protect and serve the community. Our police department, under leadership of Mayor Brown and Chief Coffey, do a great job. I see no reason to change processes that already work. It is a waste of time and resources better spent somewhere else. Thank you, Bridget Ferdinand. And those are the only emails we received, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think in fairness to our guests this evening, we'll move on to the persons that are in attendance that want to speak this evening before we take the phone calls. And going in order here, order received, I believe it's Jacob Morris, if I have that correct. And come up to the microphone, sir, if you would, please. And again, your name and address for the record, sir.
Jacob Morris, Marshall's Creek.
We'll get you a little closer to that microphone if that's possible.
Jacob Morris.
Okay.
And my wife and I have a house in Marshall's Creek. We also own some property here in Wilkes-Barre on Hazel Street. I brought two handouts. I hope they got distributed to the council members. The first one deals with what they're calling the twindemic. You know, that basically is that I'm advocating that the council and the city and administration of Wilkes-Barre promulgate a resolution recommending to the citizens of Wilkes-Barre, and most especially, well, you know, your municipal employees, as well as the children in the school district that don't have insurance, that they get their flu shot. As far as that goes, I just hope you guys put forth something publicly to that effect. You know what? It'll help the city. It'll reduce the strain on your resources. And I actually did something like that about 6 weeks ago in East Stroudsburg with the East Stroudsburg School District. On behalf of a member of the school board, I got in touch with Walmart, and it got bumped up to the supervisor for Northeast Pennsylvania, Walmart, and they're making arrangements now to do an event at the North Campus for the Stroudsburg School District for all the children without insurance. So stuff like, and innovative stuff like that is possible, and I highly recommend it to Wilkes-Barre too. I guess that was the appetizer. The entree is my proposal to rename the statue for Christopher Columbus after Amerigo Vespucci. In the handout that I hope you guys have had a chance to peruse, I make certain assertions. One, that Christopher Columbus did not discover America. He died thinking that the West Indies was the East Indies. That he introduced slavery to the Western Hemisphere. And those things alone mean that, in my view, he's not deserving of the honor of a statue. The third assertion on my part, which I happen to know is a fact, but I would like local historians to vet what I'm saying. So I would like the council to establish a task force of local historians to vet what I'm saying. You got great history professors at Wilkes, at King's. You got excellent high school teachers that teach history in the school district. Form a task force, let them vet what I'm saying about Christopher Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci. There is no contemporaneous likeness of Christopher Columbus. That depiction in stone, that just looks like a distinguished Italian gentleman. Well, guess what? Both Amerigo Vespucci and Christopher Columbus lived before the age of great European portraiture. There was no contemporaneous portraits of either of these gentlemen. So to change the name, you preserve the statue, and you can honor someone that actually figured out that the Western Hemisphere was a continent and not for nothing, but he really, Columbus, perpetrated a fraud on the King and Queen of Spain and told them that the diameter of the earth was 16,300 miles. Again, don't take my word for this. Let's establish a task force of local historians to vet what I just said. And then that task force can report to the council. Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
sir.
questions?
As far as the flu shots you had mentioned, I know our city health department, very fortunate to have our own health department, and they're very active with the flu shots, and they're starting their campaign, I believe, in the next week or two for all the residents of the city of Wilkes-Barre. So we very fortunate to have them out in the neighborhoods, actually being proactive with the flu shots. Anybody else on anything that Mr. Morris has said?
I just want to thank you for coming to council to speak about both issues, but specifically the Columbus statue in Wilkes-Barre. I've been vocally opposed to the statue. I don't think it belongs anywhere in the country, but especially here on Public Square in Wilkes-Barre. And I thank you for your research into the subject. and presenting us with an alternative. So thank you for that.
Well, I want to thank the council for allowing me this opportunity to present in person before all of you. And I really hope that the council considers my proposal to establish a task force of local historians, because I don't want to be accused of, oh, he's from New York, or he's a slumlord, or he takes Section 8, or, you know, not one of the comments in the newspaper dealt with the merits of Christopher Columbus relative to Amerigo Vespucci. And the part about the curriculum,
I'm going
as
to
it's
stop you there,
taught.
because we do have a time limit for each caller or presenter, and the little beep we heard several minutes ago was the time limit beep, so. But I appreciate the information that you've provided to us. If council members have any other questions, and we have a way of getting back in touch with you, I believe your email address is on this as well, so.
Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. John Sahoski?
Could I roll mine down and let other people go in front of me, and I'll come back?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sam Troy? He is left. Amanda Zellner? Good evening. Your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Amanda Zellner. I'm from the Volunteers of America at 25 North River Street. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. And so first, we'd just like to say thank you to the council and the administration for everything that you have been doing to keep the city safe over the past several months. We recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic has challenged us in many ways, and we recognize that strong leadership from our local governments has really made all the difference. Particularly wanted to say thank you to both the city's Department of Health and the Department of Economic and Community Development. We also want to say thank you to Officer Boyle for his ongoing communication and responsiveness during this time. Many of you may know that Volunteers of America provides a variety of human services throughout the city and county, and I came here today to share some of the observations we've made in the past few months. Last December, my colleague came before you to speak about a pilot program we launched in March of 2019 called Give Hope. Give Hope is a street outreach team that connects individuals who are experiencing homelessness to services in the community. Our Give Hope team has continued to conduct outreach through the pandemic and continuously supplies PPE, masks, hand sanitizer, water to individuals we encounter on the street, regardless of whether or not they identify as being homeless. For those seeking additional help, we also work with them to secure other services. Our efforts have been focused on keeping every resident in this city safe and simultaneously preventing the spread of COVID by providing residents with basic needs. To date, our team has connected with over 190 individuals, and we look forward to continuing to work in the community. Many of you are also familiar with Ruth's Place, which is an emergency shelter for women. Ruth's Place was forced to reduce the number of beds available for women to meet adequate social distancing requirements. However, we continue to take new referrals, and we're committed to serving as many women as possible and as safely as possible. We just wanted to say we're very grateful to the Department of Health, who is currently working with us to secure rapid testing for women to be more quickly admitted to our shelter. Testing has become more widely available, but results are still taking some time and can be as long as 2 weeks to come back. We've been able to provide isolation spaces for women while waiting for these results through individual apartment units. But we're finding that isolation has taken a very heavy toll on the mental state of many of these individuals who are experiencing extreme loneliness during an already vulnerable time. We found that the quicker we can transfer them safely to Ruth's Place, the better the results we see. Our staff has been working very hard not only to ensure everyone is safe, but to create a supportive environment. So we look forward to continuing to work with the city's Department of Health to further expedite this process. We also just wanted to let you know that following Pennsylvania's transition to the pandemic screen phase, our Dial Driver program has resumed cost-free transportation services for low-income seniors and people with a variety of disabilities. A recent grant has allowed us to acquire 3 new vehicles for our fleet. These vehicles have helped provide service to meet the needs of a constantly growing ridership and continue to be safe with social distancing. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know that we're excited to announce we hired a new regional director who joined our team amidst the pandemic. Her local expertise in home and community-based Medicare waiver services has allowed us to strengthen our network of services in the past several months. This service generally provides one-to-one client support, and so we've created 10 new jobs with living wages in the first month of this fiscal year. We think in the next several months we'll see another 10 jobs created. So we look forward to the chance to introduce this to you guys in the near future, but in the meantime, we continue to look for ways to be a good community partner, and we're open to your feedback and any questions you may have. But thank you for your time.
Thank you for all you do, council members. Anything?
The 20 jobs, they'll be on North River Street downtown?
They'll be throughout the community, but yes, that's our headquarters, so that's where our reporting location is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
John, you still want to hang out?
John Sahosky, Almond Lane. Well, first, I'm just happy to say that we got a meeting here with everybody here, so that's a good thing. I'm looking forward to seeing Mr. Brooks for your proposal for, historic preservation, because, I don't think we do a very good job at it here. We lose so many buildings. It's very sad to see these old pictures of beautiful buildings that are long gone. It sickens me sometimes. I can't imagine. There's with redevelopment and things that happen throughout this city, there's places that are just gone. Hazel Street's just gone. There's just neighborhoods that are gone. Things shouldn't have worked out the way they did. I mean, I guess the flood had things, made that happen, but, we really need to do a better job at preserving things here. I'd like to come up and support the Civilian Review Board. I know that it's probably going to be hard to get a vote on that again, and definitely get a vote on it to pass it. But I would like to at least the guys to think about it. Maybe if we have to change things. I was down for at one of the meetings where people were outside protesting, and what I did at that time was I seen a police officer who I knew, and I talked to him about 20 or 30 minutes about that. And one of the things that he was concerned about was that, that you'd have civilians who weren't familiar with police procedures judging what they're doing and having to judge things that they have to do in a split second. So maybe something, if it would work to get a civilian review board passed, would be maybe require people to take a class or a test that they would, so they'd be familiar with police procedures and things, so people aren't making, less informed decisions. They know what the police officers have to go through, because, I think that we need some kind of review. I don't think there should be an adversarial relationship with the police. I don't think we should defund the police. I know I said to Chief Coffey before, and I've said it many times, I think that we have to find money to hire more officers. I really don't think that we have enough police here. I think you said once to me that give you 100 officers and you can work miracles. I'd still think that we need to get you 100 officers to get you, to help the city do better, because we have crime problems, but I think we have, maybe there might be officer problems as well. Not many. I don't think there's many if there are, but it would just, I don't know. I think that we need some sort of outside oversight that I don't know if the Mayor Brown's proposal would do it. I mean, but at least that would be a start, but I think that we would need something a little stronger. That's all I have.
Comments, questions?
Regarding the ordinance for the Citizens Review Board as it's written currently, it does provide a guideline for extensive training for anyone who would be appointed to the board. So that should quell any concerns about, not knowing policy and procedures, not knowing use of force policies, things like that. They would undergo training to be qualified to serve on the board.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Move into the call-ins now.
Good evening. Do we have a caller online? If so, please state your name. Do we have a caller online?
Hello?
Yes, please state your name for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Aisha Pearson. I live in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania.
Oh, excuse me, could you just back up a little bit, speak a little bit slower and more clearly for the record?
Aisha Pearson. I live in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania.
Aisha Pearson, Nanticoke, Pennsylvania.
Okay, did you get it? Okay, continue. What would you like to discuss or present before council?
I'm calling regarding the Citizens Review Board. Good evening, council members. I'm calling regarding the Citizen Review Board. I believe that having the police do an internal investigation is conflict of interest. Now, I will give you the definition of conflict of interest. A term used to describe the situation in which a public official of fidelity who, contrary to the obligation and absolute duty to act for the benefit of the public. I would give you a few examples of a conflict of interest. As an accountant, I would not be able to audit my own books because I would not be able to see the problems within it. Another example, as a civilian, it would not be okay for me to be judge and jury of my own case if I was accused of doing something wrong. This Citizen Police Review Board is for the community. It is to give a little more transparency to what is going on in our law enforcement. We're not trying to put judgment on police, as their job is hard enough by any means. The objective is to be more involved in the processing and knowing that we know when our police is not doing what we expect them to do, as we pay them. In addition, in 2014, a Wilkes-Barre police officer, Robert M. Collins, was charged with sexual assault while on duty. As a citizen, we expect more from our police department. I tried to look up what the outcome of this case was, and I still cannot find it. I'm asking you to please vote yes on the CBRB in October. I am a voice of our community.
If I can comment, I believe you may be done. It sounds like you were. I'm not sure, you're calling from Nanticoke. I'm not sure if Nanticoke has a Citizens Review Board. I'm not trying to be, just curious if they do have one. And the other issue brought up about former Officer Collins, I believe that's still in the legal system and hasn't come to trial yet. So that hasn't been resolved as of yet. I don't know if she's still with us or if she's gone, okay. Next call.
Good evening. Is there a caller on the line? If so, please state your name for the record for City Council and start your presentation, please.
Hi, Jason Carr again from Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple questions today for a number of the attendees in the audience. First, I would like to ask George Brown, as a private citizen, how he feels about the Verizon cell tower possibly looking at having a variance issued for its construction at the end of Catlin Ave, where Mr. Councilman Valesco lives. As well, if the mayor can address what his action plan is to balance the $4.5 million budget deficit that he has indicated there is within the city. For Chief Coffey, with 24%, only 24% of the officers living in the city of Wilkes-Barre, does he believe that the pension crisis that the city finds itself in, where police officers are able to have a base salary of $50,000, the pension plan calls for 50% of their base salary plus the additional items that are allowed within the contract, does he believe it's financially responsible for all of those add-ons that are contributing to the financial crisis within the city, and at least as well within the pension system? Does he believe that is a prudent direction that they should continue to go in? And are you, what is your advice to the union to work with the mayor to begin the process of correcting the inadequacies of the compensation for the police? As well, Chairman Barrett, I would like to ask you, you have indicated on several occasions that you're waiting for I don't know what to make adjustments to the compensation of Wilkes-Barre City Council. I believe the city of Wilkes-Barre has the 14th largest population in the state, but the Wilkes-Barre City Council is the third highest compensated in the entire state of Pennsylvania, only behind Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. There seems to be something wrong there. With $13,500 annual salary, full health benefits, pensions, and health buyouts, that seems to be extravagant. When are changes going to be made? And I challenge all of City Council to think about what has to happen with a $4.5 million deficit. And I believe that Mayor Brown can correct me, which I hope he does. I believe the city has a total debt of over $160 million between general fund debt and pension debt. And you're sitting there as less than part-time employees taking these extravagant benefits from the taxpayers. As well, I would like to ask Mr. Chairman if Jim Ryan could comment on the changes that were voted on today. Are there any changes being made to the procedures at the city council meetings that you voted on today? Lastly, I would like to speak in favor of a civilian review board for the city. Off the top of my head, as I continue to listen to people call in and speak about it, there were issues with people using unjustifiable force that recently resigned. You have rape allegations. I believe you had police officers driving around in a prior tow contractor's seized vehicles, among other allegations. So obviously, something needs to be done. Councilwoman Beth Gilbert's plan seems to be the right choice, rather than Mayor Brown's choice of a civilian board commission that will just probably be filled with cronies. So if anyone could comment on those concerns, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We will start backwards if no one else wants to start. The procedures on council, as Mr. Ryan alluded to, were just general housekeeping procedures. It has to do with getting items on the agenda and in a timely manner. That's all that has to do. There's earth-shattering there. Mr. Carr specifically addressed me on benefits and when things could possibly change. We have addressed this with him previously. Since he specifically mentioned me, I don't take any of the benefits. I don't take the pension. I don't take the health care benefits or whatever that he had mentioned. That is still the prerogative of council members, and we are 1 year into this term. I don't foresee anything changing until, at the earliest, the next term of council. As far as the police benefits that were mentioned, police benefits, that's part of a pension reform package which is being looked at by the state legislature. I agree with that. I agree that the overtime and other benefits should not be used in calculations of final pensions. The state legislature is looking at making that a statewide change so that those salaries, those monies are not included in pension determinations, which is why you have police officers that are retired at all different salaries, all different pension benefits all over the board, and it's because of that reason. So I agree with that. I'm hopeful that there is some movement on pension reform at the state level, and I don't know if anybody else has anything else to comment on in response to Mr. Carr's presentation.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir.
just for the record, there are no, to respond personally to Mr. Carr's question, there are no changes to council meeting procedures that were voted on today. As I stated earlier, and as you alluded to, Mr. Chairman, they actually formalize what has been past practice for many years. Nothing new at all.
Any comments? Okay.
Bill, what were the questions he asked me? That was so long ago.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them there, Mayor. Something to do about a cell phone tower on the end of Catlin Avenue. I'm not familiar with that, whether it's one of those micro towers.
Yeah, in response to the cell phone tower, I am not in favor of that. I do not support it. I do not, it's going to be going before the Planning and Zoning Committee, but as a mayor, I do not support that. Yet, I do not have a voice in that because that's going to have to go before the committee. But as the mayor, as a citizen, a resident of Wilkes-Barre, I do not support it. What was the other one, Bill?
I answered the ones that I was able to copy down. I don't know if there were any other ones that... I said I don't recall any of the other ones that he might have had.
He asked about your action plan for the deficit. Your action plan for the deficit?
Thank you.
Some of the things that we're doing to try to offset the possible, as I stated before, $4 to $4.4 million deficit, we've already started taking some of the action. But some of these things are based on council support and approval, just like rewriting the bonds that we talked about. Right there's over $500,000 that we're going to actually see in the 2020 income, okay? We're also doing some other things. We are expecting some, but we're not sure how many additional permit fees to be collected for this year. So the numbers I quote are hypothetical because I don't know what other taxes are coming into us. I'm giving you a rough estimate. When I say 4.4 million, it's hypothetical because we still have 4 months, and I'm hoping that we do get some more permit fees. There's an awful lot of things going on within the city. You see a lot of new buildings coming up. You see the Geisinger 65, you see the other Geisinger. There's new things coming in. Some of those things we will be getting some permit fees. What's going to be the total shortage? I don't know. I do know that the budget that you approved last year for 2020, if we did not have the COVID virus, thanks to your help, we would have not only had a balanced budget, we would have had a surplus. So what I'm saying is that we had so much confidence in that, that it would have been a surplus. What do we have now? Folks, it's up in the air. I mean, everything we do on a daily basis, I get a daily report from our director of finance telling us what kind of shape we're in. So we're looking at it on a daily basis. Everything we decide is based on what's best for the residents. So, Jason, to answer your question, we are actively on a daily, weekly basis looking at ways that we could hopefully get more revenue, but also cut expenses. We have done some things to cut expenses, and we're going to continue to do that. Mr. McCormick, our city administrator, myself, Mr. Kittrick, we've relayed to all of our managers, be very, very careful, use a sharp pen, watch what you're doing as far as what you're incurring as far as expenses and other things of that nature. So, folks, we're doing everything we can, okay? But I don't have a final number for you. I have a projection. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay.
Hello, my name is Sophie Goodfellow, calling from Luzerne County.
Sophie.
Hello, council members. I'm calling to ask you to vote in favor of the Citizen Police Review Board. I would like to thank Councilman Brooks and Councilwoman Gilbert McBride for seeing the value in the transparency and accountability that your community members are calling for with this ordinance. I hope that you see this review board as a chance for the police to build back trust with the individuals living here. When someone feels that they've been mistreated by police, we deserve to know that our complaints are being taken seriously and being reviewed through an unbiased lens. Lives are on the line, and this has to be taken seriously. I know for a fact that you've heard the stories of many of your constituents telling you about how they've been treated by police in our city. Please, I ask you to listen to their experiences. This is not political. This is something very real. The police should not be policing themselves. In no other profession would that be okay. So why should misconduct within the police force be left to the police? It is my understanding that Mayor Brown, Councilman Belusco, Councilman Barrett, and Councilman Marconi all believe to some extent that Mayor Brown's Wilkes-Barre Advisory Board is sufficient in ensuring that the police are doing the best job that they can. I would agree that the police should always be internally looking for ways to better their practices, such as by using body cameras in all interactions with civilians. However, an internal review board leaves much to be desired in terms of us, your constituents, knowing that misconduct with individual officers is being properly handled. As many of you probably know, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered by police officer Derek Chauvin, who had 18 complaints filed against him with the Minneapolis police. Unfortunately, the Minneapolis police do not have a citizen police review board in place. There, police misconduct is investigated by the police officer's supervisor. Of the 18 complaints made against Officer Chauvin, only 2 were taken seriously, and Officer Chauvin was only given a letter of reprimand. Why do I bring this up? Because without transparency and accountability for police misconduct in Wilkes-Barre, your constituents have no idea if officers have similar histories to that of Officer Chauvin in Minneapolis. The lack of transparency is daunting. We truly do not know who the people are that are supposed to be keeping all of us safe. It is interesting to note that Police Chief Coffey's predecessor, former Chief Marcella Lindacki, actually pitched forming a Citizens Police Review Board to the former administration of Wilkes-Barre, but she retired before she ever received a definite answer. It seems suspicious to me that former Chief Lindacki found a need for transparency through our review board, but today's administration does not think it's a good idea. It makes one wonder just exactly why there is so much pushback. Is it just that the police force does not want to be held accountable? I once again urge you to please consider the stories and experiences of the people that you are supposed to be representing. I remind you that this review board is not an effort to take away power, but for us to know when misconduct is happening and to know that it has been taken care of in an appropriate manner. This should not be a threat to police officers of our city, as they should already be being held to the highest standards. Thank you for your time, and I hope you continue to be well.
Thank you.
Hello, do we have a caller online? If so, please state your name, and if you could spell it, it would help us greatly with the record. First and last name, please.
Hi, my name is Omar from Wilkes-Barre. Good evening, everyone. I'm calling in regards to
Could
the
you,
citizen
excuse me,
voice
could
review.
you spell your name, please?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah. But first, so I'm calling in regards to the Citizen Police Review Board. But first, I would like to say that Historian Task Force sounds awesome, great idea. Let's do it. And we also need to preserve the beautiful historical buildings around the city, because I do believe it will eventually have a positive impact, economic impact in the long run. So first, I would like to address some statements that have been said in the past in rejection of the review board. The possibly most absurd and furthest from the truth statement that I have heard is that this is an attack on the police. That dangerous emotional statement invokes the idea that those who support the board have ill intent, and the only way you can come up with that conclusion is that if you view us as enemies, you are trying to prevent from proliferating. This is not a personal attack to anyone. It is a proposition to improve a system that, quite frankly, has oppressed many people based on their race and been fundamentally based on their social status and class. Again, it is not an attack on the police, but rather a system that places these officers in sometimes impossible situations that ends up with further oppression rather than a conflict resolution. We have to recognize that this requires an array of approach, such as training reform, education, and most importantly, an independent body that can render objective conclusions. You cannot argue that what we have right now is enough when those that review complaints are those that have an inherent bias due to the role that they possess. And another thing I want to point out is that if you increase police presence without improving the mechanisms for accountability or bias in the actual practicing of policing, or without addressing the fundamental factors that proliferate inequality, that is a recipe for disaster. So we are here telling you right now, iceberg right ahead. And although I do like the idea of substations, I believe it will be detrimental without other accompanying changes. But I'd like to be fair, so I have a question to those that oppose such a review board, to the 3 council members. Can you produce any statistics that show this self-police review board will result in a more objective review compared to a citizen police review board? Because ultimately, it is that objectivity that will help improve accountability and community relationship. Lastly, in response to the 2 emails in rejection of the Citizens Police Review Board, anecdotal experience is just that, anecdotal. The statistics are clear. People of color and perceived lower social class and status are being treated differently. So that's it from me. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward towards your responses.
Thank you. Anyone? Go ahead.
If there's anyone who still wishes to call in, please do so now. Giving another minute, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Okay, if there are no more call-ins from the public, Mr. Chairman?
Well, anything else from council?
I have nothing. Thank you.
I feel bad, I gotta turn my back here to all of you, but, okay, well, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion. Stay safe, everyone.
Just have
Thank-
one
thank you.
announcement. If council would please stay at your seats to sign resolutions and ordinances, please. That'd be great. Thank you.